Hi, welcome to Clear Coding. I'm your host, Stephen Cleary. I was on Vimeo this last weekend and I found a whole bunch of old videos of mine that I had completely forgotten about from almost a decade ago. So this is one of those videos. It talks about how async and await, the keywords, were adopted by a bunch of different languages. And this is something I've always found fascinating because these languages, as I mentioned near the end of this video, these languages are designed in very different ways. Some of them are designed by the community. It's like an open source language design. Some of them are designed by one particular company, like Microsoft. And some of them are designed by standards bodies. And yet, many different languages from all these different design perspectives all kind of came together in the way that they adopted async and await very similarly. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy.
Today I want to take a look at what I call the Async Invasion timeline. And when I use the term Async Invasion, what I'm really referring to is the tendency for many different languages to adopt these new async and await keywords. And we're going to take a look at how that adoption has progressed over time. So let's dive in. The first one in my timeline is actually a functional language, F#. In 2010, F# was released with something that they called asynchronous workflows. Now, when you're talking about asynchronous code in functional languages, you don't actually need new keywords. And technically speaking, the F# async and await language structures are not actually keywords. They're part of the library. And this is normal for functional languages. In a functional language, in order to do asynchronous programming, all you need to do is have what's called a future monad, and then put a little library support around that to make it a little easier to use. And that's really all you need in a functional language. But F#, I think, is notable, and I'm including them in this timeline even though they are a functional language, and technically speaking, the async and await symbols in F# are not actually keywords. I'm still including them here because what they did in 2010 with their asynchronous workflows was really provide a great structure on which the async and await keywords in other languages were built. So there's a lot of common ground there. There's some differences. They're not exactly the same. When you use async and await in F#, it's not exactly the same thing as using async and await in C#. But you can definitely see the relationships there. And how async and await built off of asynchronous workflows in F# as a functional language. So moving on to our imperative languages, the next language to get async and await, well, both two languages, there's C# and Visual Basic, both released at the same time as part of Visual Studio 2012. And this is the first time that async and await was included in a large mainstream language, widely used mainstream language. And this was a huge step forward in language design. It's really a revolutionary idea. One of Microsoft's true language innovations, I would say. Microsoft has borrowed a lot of things from other languages, but with async and await, it's something that they actually came up with themselves and are now affecting a bunch of other languages. So they're sharing back out to the language community, so to speak. So both C# and Visual Basic were released as part of Visual Studio 2012 and brought with it this new async and await programming style, these new keywords that allowed you to express maintainable asynchronous code. Well, it took a little while for the next language to pick up on this, and I find it very amusing that the next language to adopt async and await is actually a variant of PHP. So before any of the other big names came on board, there's actually this variant of PHP that's used at Facebook called Hack. And they adopted async and await pretty quickly after C# and Visual Basic, first showed how it was done, how it was possible. And Facebook immediately saw the benefit for this on the server side, the scalability with maintainable code. And so they adopted it quite quickly into their language Hack, and the version that was released in 2014 includes support for the async and await keywords. And Google followed suit in early 2015 with their language Dart, which is kind of like their attempt at making a better JavaScript. I don't know if it really ever took off. Most people don't really use it. Same thing with hack. Most people, if they're a PHP programmer, they use PHP. They don't really use hack. Same thing with Dart. Most people just use JavaScript. They don't really use Dart. But both of these languages, here we have Facebook and Google both looking at something that Microsoft innovated and saying, that's a great idea. We're going to take that and put that in our languages. So I think that really says something about async and await. And the next one to come out at the end of that year in 2015 was TypeScript. TypeScript being Microsoft's JavaScript with types, so to speak. So we have here, and before I go on, TypeScript is actually supposed to be a superset of JavaScript, but in this case, actually, they introduced async and await before JavaScript even did. So TypeScript adopts async and await in the fall of 2015. And at this point, TypeScript is another big language. But at this point, all of the widely adopted languages using async and await are all controlled by Microsoft. So you've got like C#, Visual Basic, TypeScript. These are all like the big languages controlled by Microsoft that use async and await. It's still very much a Microsoft-centric idea. And there's a handful of other languages that aren't as widely adopted that have adopted async and await. So we've got hack and Dart. We've got F#. We've got, yeah, that's it. So hack, Dart, and F#, being async and await compatible. But these are much smaller adopted languages. They're not covering a lot of developers yet. But in the fall of 2015, also in September, we actually had a major language come on board. So this is with Python 3.5. In 2015, they released the 3.5 version of the language supports async and await. And this is the first time that a really huge language outside of Microsoft has adopted async and await. And Python, I love the way that Python is developed. It's very much in the open, very democratic way of building the language and designing the language over time. And I think that's really worked for them over time. So 3.5 came out and with async and await support. And after that, we have one more item of note, and that is, of course, JavaScript. JavaScript, just in June of 2017, ECMAScript 2017 was released with full and official support for async and await. Of course, you could have done it in Babel, over the last few years. And Chrome actually released official support for async and await before the language actually officially included it. But, so async and await has kind of been in JavaScript for several years, actually. But now it's like officially part of the actual language. So JavaScript, this is the huge language that everyone is using. You can't get away from it. What's the law? Everything that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript, right? I think that was Atwood. JavaScript is like a huge language as far as influence goes. And they have also adopted async and await. Now, at this point, depending on your, how you factor in popularity of programming languages, if you want to look and see, okay, how many developers can use async and await today, across several different languages, it's actually getting quite large. We're about, the async and await keywords are about at a third of all developers. Again, the numbers vary widely depending on who you look at, but it's about a third because they've got C#, they've got Python, they've got JavaScript, and those three are big languages. There's a few holdouts here that haven't adopted async and await yet. C++ is another very major language. They are considering async and await, but they're also looking at an alternative proposal, which can do the same thing in a different way. So they're kind of still, evaluating their options. They haven't gone forward with the async and await approach yet. Although Microsoft's C++ compiler does support it, you can enable it just for them, using the resumable functions proposal. But C++ as an official language has not yet adopted async and await. And the other big elephant in the room is Java. And Java by itself comprises some 20 to 25% of all programming. So Java is still a huge, huge language. As far as language evolution, design, they've kind of slowed down. They have, as far as I know, they have not looked at adopting async and await yet. Maybe there's some plans that aren't that I'm not aware of, but at least right now, Java is not async and await compatible yet. So that concludes today's brief look at our timeline and how async and await has been being adopted by other languages. And one of the key takeaways that I want to bring out with this is not just to look at how this has happened over time, but also to bear in mind these are other large companies. These are community groups with Python. These are standards bodies with JavaScript. You've got a lot of different groups of people here who are saying async and await is great. We want this in our language. It helps us do things. And so we're going to take a few videos, quite a few videos actually, and we're going to look in detail at why async and await is such a great idea. I hope you tune in. This is Steve Clary, and it's been Async Time.